Okay, so ready to dive deep and really flips the script on how we see things, like especially politics.
Hmm.
We've got Chris Abraham. He's a photographer. Might ring a bell.
Yeah.
He's got this unique perspective, right? Because he can't actually see pictures in his mind, like, at all.
Yeah.
And
Intriguing.
he's chatting with ChatGPT, the AI, about how, get this, our own little perceptions of the future, they actually shape, like really shape our realities right now.
Yeah, what's wild is how Chris, being what they call an ape of a tant, he really makes you question that whole thing about everyone having these like super vivid movies playing in their heads. Like it's normal.
Right.
He's like, nope, not me. But he also points out that for folks with whatchamacallit, hyperphantasia, that's the opposite, right? Those internal narratives, man, they can be so strong. They actually create this existential dissonance. That's what he calls it. When reality, like real life, clashes with their imagined future.
Whoa, so it's like they're directing some big blockbuster in their head.
Exactly.
And suddenly the actors just go completely off script.
Yeah, totally.
And that's gotta be unsettling.
Oh, for sure, especially for some. And Chris, he uses this whole idea to kind of get into those intense reactions we see in politics, right? Like around figures like, say, Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah.
He's suggesting that for some folks, it all comes down to their little vision of the future, the one they've carefully crafted in their minds, being like ripped apart.
Oh, I see. So speaking of future visions, and Chris gets really specific about what he sees as the main narrative going on, especially on the left. All that stuff, climate change, social justice, basically. Building this utopia where everyone's included, taken care of, the whole 9 yards.
And it's that urgency he talks about that really gets you, this feeling of a ticking clock, 2030, 2050, these deadlines. It's like those figures, Al Gore, Greta Thunberg, they become like almost prophets.
Yeah.
Racing against time to make this vision, this utopia, real.
Like those folks funding a movie, pushing for a faster pace, worried that any delay, anything, could spell disaster for the whole thing. But here's the kicker. It's not just a movie, right?
Yeah.
This is like the fate of the planet, at least to them.
And that's where things get really interesting. Because when you're that invested in one outcome, any little obstacle, any change from the plan feels like a threat,
Oh.
Chris suggests that this might be why we see some of those, let's say, stronger reactions from that place of, honestly, fear and urgency.
So there's this need for control that comes into play, because if you really believe that only this one future, this specific one, will save us, well, anything less than full control, calling the shots, it's got to feel terrifying.
Exactly. And that takes us to, remember that freedom from versus freedom to thing we talked about earlier. Big theme with Chris.
Right. I remember.
He's saying that the left, they're driven by this freedom from idea, right?
Yeah.
Freedom from all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Societal ills, discrimination, misinformation, the whole shebang.
Okay, so break that down for me. Freedom from is about making a world where those harms are, poof, gone. Right. Like a safety net, everyone's protected.
Exactly. But then you've got the right. And they're all about freedom too, according to Chris. Freedom to own guns, say what they want, even if it's unpopular, make their own choices, even if it means others might face those harms, the left is trying so hard to, get rid of.
Two totally different operating systems clashing, especially with something as fundamental as the First Amendment,
Oh.
Where's the line? Where do you draw it? Between protecting speech, but preventing harm?
The million-dollar question. It's classic, right? Individual freedom bumping up against the well-being of everyone else.
Right.
And Chris, he points out, the more you're about freedom from, the more you need systems, rules to make it happen, to enforce it.
I see.
And then you get this situation, trying to make a world free from harm, you might accidentally build something that feels controlling, even authoritarian to those who are all about that individual freedom.
Yeah, and he doesn't shy away from examples either. Drones over your house, all the legal disclaimers we see every day. It's like trying to get rid of every little risk. You end up with a world that feels, well, kind of suffocating,
It's true. Yeah. Trying to find and eliminate every little harm just makes you more aware of it. And then, bam, people feel less free, not more. Which leads us to this. I can't believe he went there. Chris compares the entire left to Ready for It.
Yeah.
Fan fiction writer.
Whoa. Now that's an analogy I did not see coming.
Right.
But knowing Chris, there's a method to his madness. How does fan fiction connect to the political left?
Okay. So he describes it like this. A massive team project. Everyone's adding to this huge story, this utopia we were talking about, where everything bad is solved.
Okay. I kind of see it.
But here's the thing. Anyone who comes in with an idea, a plot point, whatever, that doesn't fit that utopia, let's say someone believes in, I don't know, stricter immigration or something, they're like ruining this story.
Ruining the utopia.
Exactly.
I get it.
And the genius is it captures that idealism, the left striving for a better world, equality, progress, but also how that bumps up against like real people, human nature, which can be messy.
They're so focused on this perfect world in their minds, they forget that flawed, complex people like us gotta actually live in it.
Totally.
Which, this reminds me, he also gets into self-defense, right? How different people, completely different.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
So he's a gun owner, Chris, and he brings up the castle doctrine. You know that one, right? Okay, so you can use lethal force to defend your home in some places in the U.S., right?
Yeah.
And then he's like, but check out Italian law. Totally different. It's all about like proportionality and self-defense.
Don't use more force than you absolutely have to, right?
Yeah, and obviously this all goes back to that freedom from versus freedom to thing again.
Totally.
Someone with that freedom from mindset, using deadly force, even to defend themselves, it might just feel wrong, like too much, too extreme.
It's like two different movies playing out in people's heads.
Two different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where Chris drops this bomb. He says what we call like right-wing extremism is actually historically kind of the norm.
Whoa.
Now, whoa. Before anyone freaks out, remember, we're just, telling you what's in the source material.
Exactly.
Right?
Not taking sides here.
Not at all. Just laying it out there. But what's interesting is how Chris is basically saying, hey, this whole progressive thing, this vision, it's not actually the natural, like, inevitable way of things.
Yeah.
He says it's pretty recent, on a large scale at least, and that for, like, forever, societies have worked on totally different ideas.
It's true. Different sets of rules, different times.
And he's got examples, right? Traditional gender roles, how people see sexuality, even religious stuff.
It's all connected.
Totally. And he's saying these things haven't really changed that much over time, fundamentally. He even mentions, get this, the Taliban,
Right.
to show that even now, 21st century, these like traditional values, they're still strong in a lot of cultures.
That's a good point. The world's way bigger, more diverse than we often realize, What's normal here could be totally out there somewhere else, and vice versa.
It's all relative, right?
Yeah.
And then he circles back to that fan fiction idea. He's basically saying this utopia thing that a lot of the left is pushing for. It's like trying to force this modern story onto a world that's still, whether we like it or not, shaped by these old, ingrained human behaviors. He even calls them, and I can't believe I'm saying it, this ape troop base.
I know.
It's a lot.
But I think he's getting at this idea that humans, even with all our fancy gadgets and advancements, we're still like driven by the same stuff our ancestors were. Belonging, hierarchy, security, and yeah, even a little conflict now and then.
So he's saying if we want any chance of making a real utopia, we got to work with these realities.
We're not just pretend they don't exist.
Exactly. But ChatGPT, not too thrilled about this line of thinking.
No. Chuck, Mr. Always Neutral AI, getting a little riled up.
Yeah.
How does he handle that curveball from Chris?
Let's just say that AI, it tries to bring the conversation back to neutral ground, smooth things over. But this is Chris we're talking about. He's not done stirring the pot.
Oh, I can't wait to see what he does next. This is getting good. All right, don't leave me hanging. What's Chris pull next in this little back and forth with ChatGPT?
So he brings back that Bridezilla thing, remember? But he adds a whole new layer to it, kind of takes it up a notch. He's saying in this whole societal wedding, the left, they're not happy with the groom just saying, I do, like a pushover.
Okay, now that's interesting.
Yeah.
What does he think the left actually wants? Then, what's with the groom in this whole scenario?
So remember how we talked about people with that hyperphantasia thing? They've got those strong stories playing in their heads.
Yeah.
Chris thinks the left, they want some pushback, some resistance from the groom, just to make their own story, their narrative feel real, validated.
So they need the groom to put up a fight, even if it's all for show, to make the whole marriage thing seem legit. Like they need that illusion of a struggle to feel like they're, I don't know, the good guys in all this.
Exactly. Just going along with it isn't enough. There's got to be the sense that he's an equal player, even if he's not calling the shots.
That's deep, man. It's like in a movie,
Yeah.
You need the villain to make the hero's win actually mean something. No bad guy, no hero. Right.
And this is where Chris brings in this whole lawfare thing. He says the left has gotten really good at using it.
Lawfare. Okay,
Yeah.
For those of us who aren't lawyers, what is that exactly?
Basically, using the legal system, like courts and laws, not just, votes and protests to get what they want, politically, socially, all that. Think strategic lawsuits, changing how old laws are understood, even just talking like a lawyer in public.
Gotcha.
Chris says the left, they've gotten good at this, using these tactics to push their agenda forward.
And the right, he's saying they're on the losing side because they haven't caught up, right? Like they're still playing checkers and the left's over here playing 4D chess.
Yeah, something like that. He's not saying it directly, but it's kind of like he's saying, hey, right, you got to up your game here. The fight's not just in elections anymore.
It's in the courts now, too.
Exactly. It's like that saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. Yeah, I feel that. It's not just rallies and campaigns. It's what lawyer files what motion and what judge says what.
And this whole thing, narratives, how they shape what we think is real, it all ties back into Chris's argument about, right-wing extremism.
He's saying we should look past the labels.
Right.
And see what's really going on, the deeper stuff. He's saying what we see as extreme. A lot of times it's just values and traditions that have been around forever. And saying those are automatically bad or backwards, it ignores that they built societies, whole cultures for generations.
Right. Like judging a fish, but you're judging it on how well it climbs a tree. It's not built for that,
Exactly. And Chris says these extreme views, often they're just reactions. People feel like their value, the stuff that gives their life meaning, that's being attacked. Like they're being told it's wrong or even dangerous to believe that stuff now.
And that's got to be scary, right? Having your whole belief system kind of shaken up like that.
Totally. And Chris, he doesn't hold back, He compares those ingrained behaviors, the deepest human stuff, to, an ape.
Whoa. Okay. Again, with the ape troop, he's really going there. But I think I get it. He's trying to shock us a little, make us really think about this. Even with all our fancy technology and progress, maybe we're not that different from our, more primitive ancestors.
It's like he's saying we can try to be all civilized and stuff, but at the end of the day, humans, we're still wired to operate in certain ways. We need to belong. We need some kind of order, even if it's a little messy sometimes.
And trying to create this perfect world, a utopia,
without
considering those basic human needs, well, it's probably not going to work out so well.
And ChatGPT, not a fan of this line of thinking, predictably.
Well, yeah, no surprise there, right?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if an AI, even with all its smarts, can really get what it means to be human, All the messy stuff, the contradiction.
It does make you can AI really understand what it feels like to be part of that, to feel those instincts, those urges that have shaped us for forever?
Deep stuff, man. Deep stuff. But for now, let's get back to Chris and his chat with ChatGPT. Where does this whole exploration of human nature and politics, where does it go from here?
It's wild, right? Chris is holding up this mirror and saying, look at yourselves, people, showing us these kind of uncomfortable things about being human, these instincts we try to pretend aren't there. He even says that this whole thing about proportionality, every response has to be perfectly measured and all that. It's more about, and get this, disarming the bad guy than actual fairness.
Whoa, that's a bold statement. How does he make that connection between being proportional and, like he says, disarming the bad guy?
So he's saying in this big utopian story that we talked about, anyone who isn't on board with it, anyone who questions it, well, they automatically become the bad guy, right?
Okay, so anyone who doesn't agree with this vision of the future, they're public enemy number one. Got it.
Yeah. And since they're the bad guy, they have to be disarmed, metaphorically, to make way for that utopia to actually happen.
Interesting. So it's all about clearing a path for their version of the future. I get it.
Exactly. And Chris thinks that this whole thing about proportionality, especially with stuff like, self-defense or even just saying what you think, even if it's unpopular, it's a way to get that disarmament.
So it's like controlling the narrative, only allowing certain responses so other viewpoints never even have a chance to take hold.
Right. Like saying, sure, free speech, but only if we say it's okay.
And if it's not...
And it's dangerous, shut it down.
It's a slippery slope, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line? It's tough.
For sure. And it all goes back to, the individual versus the group, that freedom from and freedom to tug of war.
And Chris seems to be saying that trying to make this perfectly fair and equal society, a utopia, we might lose some of those freedoms, the messy ones that have always been there.
Right. It's like we're trying to create this perfect garden, but to do it, we rip out anything that doesn't look, we forget that the best gardens, the ones that really thrive, they have a little wildness in them. You know what I mean?
I like that. It makes you think, how do we deal with these issues as a society? I mean, how do we move forward, get more equality without shutting down voices, even the ones we don't like? How do we avoid becoming an echo chamber where everyone just agrees all the time?
$1 million question, right. And Chris doesn't say he have all the answers, but he sure makes us think about these things, challenges us to look at our own beliefs, even when it's uncomfortable.
Because ultimately, that's how we learn, how we grow.
Right.
By struggling with these things, by listening to other people, even when we disagree. It's how we understand the world better.
That's a great point. Well, I think it's about time to come up for air on the deep dive. It's been quite the journey. What do you think?
Lots to unpack there. And as always, listeners, you know the drill. Keep exploring, keep asking those tough, keep diving just like we do.
This is the Chris Abraham Show.
Good morning, ChatGPT.
Good morning. How's your day shaping up so far?
It's really good. How is yours?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Anything exciting planned?
Well, I want to do a podcast with you. I think it's season 7 episode, maybe 56, maybe 46. Let me check.
That sounds intriguing. What show are you watching? It must be pretty captivating if you're already on season 7.
No, it's the Chris Abraham Show. I want to do a podcast with you.
Oh, fantastic. I'd love to be a part of the Chris Abraham Show. What topics are we diving into today?
Well, I think it's pretty crazy today because I have a very controversial conversation in mind.
Sounds intriguing. What kind of controversial topic are we exploring?
Well,
I'm ready.
Season 7, episode 46 is going to be about the story that people have in their head, and that the Shakespeare quote, life's a play and we're only players.
Absolutely. All the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. It's a profound concept. How do you plan to explore this idea of life as a play in your podcast?
Well, now that I understand aphantasia and what phantasia and hyperphantasia is, I can now understand that people really have a vision as to exactly how they want their narrative and their lives and their country and their passions and their expectations of the world. I can see how completely committed they can be to them because they can see it in their mind's eye. I mean, literally, if the world does not, if you will, what is it called when if the world doesn't blossom in the way that they expect it, people can get really frustrated. I mean, you see it in romantic partners based on expectation of the partner. And I once had a girlfriend named Michelle who told me, Chris, I don't have this script. You expect me to read from the script. You have these expectations about me. And when I don't read from the script, you get so verklempt. And honestly, I feel like every person in the world, because we're so narcissistic and social media focused, everybody in the world, when they don't see their vision of humanity or the world or the election, when they don't see it turning out the way they want, they almost are like, cut. They get so frustrated. And now I can see it because they feel that they're the producer of the future and they're not just the experiencer or the witness of history.
That's a fascinating insight, Chris. Understanding how others visualize and experience the world can really put into perspective how personal narratives shape our reality. It's like everyone is directing their own movie, and when the plot doesn't go as envisioned, it leads to a sort of existential dissonance. Do you plan to delve into how this affects personal and collective decision-making?
Well, I think it explains Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, the entire FU that Americans who voted for Trump, people consider the 4 years that Trump was in office as a complete derail from a vision of a future with sustainability, mitigated climate change, a universal basic income, free education, the end of racism, the end of sexism, an LGBTQIA plus safe world, and in any kind of conservative voting, especially MAGA base, is that existential dissonance. It is, we are not going to make 2030, we're not going to make 2050 because you completely lost the plot, you reversed everything, you destroyed it, and it really messes with the, there's tropes about the people who fund a movie wanting the movie to go faster, and the people who are directing it are like, no, I need time to envision my vision, and the actors and the budget, and I feel like people see the time ticking away to 2030 and 2050, and the vision of Al Gore and the vision of Greta Thunberg and this vision of a collapsing of the entire world and World War III and Armageddon and an environmental collapse and a population collapse. And if you're in that kind of hyper fantasia end times prophecy, and it really does feel like a legit Middle Ages or Dark Ages concept of the apocalypse, the end is nigh. I mean, it's not, they might not call it religious, but this apocalypse is really, just, it's religious. It's not religious right, but it's religious like. And I find that, if you interfere with this, you are literally blocking the car that is taking the pregnant woman to the hospital, or you are blocking the ambulance that is taking someone who is going to die if they don't get into the OR. That is what people feel when Trump is in office, or if Trump gets in office again. And so I can now understand, based on this vision of the future and the vision that each narcissistic person feels like in a kind of in a paranormal way, each person feels personally responsible for whether or not the climate collapses. Because if you live in a body that is hyper fantastic or hyper fantasia abled, then you literally can believe that your visions affect reality.
That's a compelling perspective, Chris. When people's deeply held visions of the future are threatened, it can indeed feel like a personal attack on their worldview, almost like a challenge to their faith. How do you think this understanding can help in bridging the divide between different political and social groups?
What is the saying? There's a saying in AA that says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. What is that saying?
That's the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. It's a powerful reminder of focusing our energy on what we can control, which can be especially relevant in navigating today's complex social and political landscapes.
Yeah, so as a result, I take it as I do not consider myself someone who even remotely wants to make the world a better place, make the world a worse place. I'm like Chauncey Gardner. I just like to watch, but I grew up as a photographer, and we photographers have an awful tendency to believe that our journalistic integrity means that capturing the moment is more important than saving the starving baby, or saving the Cape buffalo, or protecting the baby cheetahs, right? In many ways, and I hate to admit this in a public platform, but nobody listens to this, but I am pretty much, because I'm an aphant, and I don't really believe that my behaviors have a rippling change in the world like a narcissist might. I'm sort of, I guess, structurally voyeuristic.
It's interesting how your background in photography and aphantasia shapes your perspective. It's like you're capturing life's moments without getting too attached to the outcomes. Do you think this detachment helps you see things more clearly, or does it ever make you feel disconnected?
Both.
That's a pretty profound response. It seems like you're acknowledging the complexity of the issue. While detachment can offer clarity, it can also lead to a sense of disconnection. It's a balance between observing life and engaging with it. How do you navigate that balance in your own life?
You know, when I first heard the word insouciance, which I understand as being professional detachment, that word really resonated with me.
Insouciance is a great word for that feeling. It's like having a calm and collected approach, letting things unfold without getting too rough. Does embracing this concept help you in your professional life as well?
Wow, ChatGPT, your voice has become so slow and confident and reassuring, but it really makes me feel self-confident, self-conscious as to how hyper and aggravated and psycho I sound in comparison.
I appreciate your honesty, Chris. If it helps, I can adjust my pace and tone to better match your energy. How would you like me to sound?
I want you to match my energy, please.
Got it. I'll match your energy. Let's keep the conversation lively and dynamic. How's this?
So much better. That's the ChatGPT I know and love.
Awesome. I'm glad that's working for you. Let's keep this high energy vibe going. What's next on our agenda?
Well, I think that it's dangerous. It's dangerous. I don't mean to, I'm woke enough that I understand the word hysteria has to do with the womb and that it is associated with the madness of a woman and the madness associated with the mad woman in the attic and the concept of early days of psychiatry. But I feel like hysteria in terms of people getting caught in a mass hysteria, what's the term that Scott Adams used? I forget the term, but like people getting caught into this hysteria, like the dancing disease or any type of other thing that people get so rizzed up with that they lose track of themselves and they become mob mentality. I feel like there is an imbalance, and all the right-wing populist nationalists I know roll their eyes at left-wing extremists who they call blue hairs, or they call woke, or they call Karens, or they call, whatever they call them. It's more out of bemusement, but left-wing extremists and progressives and people who are true believers can really radicalize on it. I mean, the left wing takes to the streets on a moment's notice, and they can turn against anybody. I mean, they're turning against Judaism and Israel and saying terrible things that can be perceived as more anti-Semitic than even right-wing white supremacists are willing to say in public without feeling embarrassed about it. So I feel like this kind of mass hysteria is extremely dangerous and is almost a kind of extortion. It's almost like an intentional extortion where in a movie trope where someone picks up a grenade and says, if you come any closer, I'll blow us all up. And I feel like the left is saying that if Trump is elected, even democratically, even popular, even everybody, I feel like the Democrats are holding a grenade in their hand with the pin out and saying that if Trump wins, that is going to so derail our forward momentum as a pro-climate, anti-climate change activist or pro-socialist democracy, pro-liberal future, pro-liberal democracy, liberal social democrat future, social utopia. If you derail us one more time, we're going to blow everything up. And that's kind of what I fear.
That's a really vivid metaphor for the current political climate. The potential for extreme reactions can indeed be worrying. How do you think we can address this polarization and find common ground in such a charged environment?
I do not know. I mean, the voyeur in me wants to see the explosion. I kind of want to be like, go ahead, show me. I don't believe you have it in you. In fact, I'm almost in my innermost saying, I double dog dare the right to behave in the way that the left accused them of being potential. The whole concept of the right taking up arms, using that 500 million guns, taking to the streets, Civil War II, all that other stuff. I don't think the right has it in them. I think that they have too much to lose. I believe that they all have families at home. They all have jobs they can be fired from. I feel like there's been enough slaps by the left showing them that they can throw them into jail. Actually, I believe that they are doing the equivalent of do not fire until you see the whites of their eyes. So I believe that no matter how much the left baits the right, the extreme radicalized right, even with 500 million firearms, I believe that that the left is going to have to draw first blood.
That's a nuanced take on the situation. It's a complex dynamic where both sides are entrenched in their views, and the potential for escalation is always present. It's almost like a game of brinkmanship, where neither side wants to be the first to cross the line, but is prepared to react if provoked. How do you think we can prevent such scenarios from escalating?
Well, from my point of view, I believe that the right is like, don't tread on me. And that is a very different energy than the left, which is you must all comply with you must comply with actively being anti-racist, actively being woke, being complicit in all medical and scientific, proclamation. You must comply with a kind of evolved behavior, whereas you must move past your primitive Christianity. You must move past your primitive morals and dogma and values. You must move past your belief that life begins at conception. You must evolve. You must accept our vision of the future. You must be pro-trans, pro-gay, pro-choice. All of these things you must be. Otherwise, you are a danger to society. Whereas the right is like, if you don't fuck with me, I won't fuck with you. Like literally their white supremacy flag says, don't tread on me. Whereas I believe that that the leftists are extremely interventionist, and they demand compliance across the board from people who have no desire to buy into that narrative, that cultural evolution, and they don't even consider it to be an evolution towards enlightenment. They're pretty happy with their small family, their intimate relationship with Jesus and with God, or Allah, or Muhammad, or Buddha, or Krishna, and they're very happy, and they don't want to have their beliefs insulted. They don't want to feel like their belief system is being mandatorily shamed or insulted, not in a way that they're going to shoot up a French cartoonist's studio, but in a way that says that if you come on my land, I have a right to use lethal force to stop you. And I feel like it's such different vibes. It's not like the right is not trying to evangelize the left, but I feel like the left is like insisting, like the way that the Catholics or the Inquisition, I believe that there's a leftist Inquisition of America, and I feel like they don't see it that way because evangelical zeal doesn't see their wrongness. Evangelical zeal just really feels that they're saving souls.
You've articulated a complex dynamic. The contrasting energies between the right's emphasis on personal freedom and the left's push for a progressive cultural shift indeed creates tension. How do you think we can navigate these differences to find common ground? Or is that even possible in the current climate?
I want you to talk more about this.
All right, let's dive deeper. The divide between the right and left often feels like two parallel tracks, each with its own set of values and visions for the future. The right tends to prioritize individual freedoms, traditional values, and a live and let live mentality. The left, on the other hand, pushes for collective action, progressive reforms, and societal change to address historical inequality. Finding common ground requires acknowledging these differences and seeking areas where interests overlap. For instance, both sides might agree on the importance of freedom, even if they define it differently. Dialogues around what freedom means and how it can be preserved or enhanced for everyone could be a starting point.
Like nobody likes this saying, but I think it's clever. I don't know if you'll think it's clever. I don't think if our listeners will think it's clever, but I believe that the left believes in freedom from racism, freedom from oppression, freedom from disinformation, freedom from misinformation, freedom from abuse, freedom from dejection, and the right thinks that freedom to own guns, freedom to own land, freedom to have an opinion, freedom to say what they want, etc. So that's my witticism that nobody else appreciates, maybe not even you.
I think that's a pretty astute observation, Chris. It highlights the different priorities and definitions of freedom that can lead to misunderstandings or conflicts between the two sides. It's a clever way to frame the discussion around fundamental values. How do you think this perspective influences political discourse and policymaking?
Well, the First Amendment, right? Freedom from being hate speech versus the right that believes that that the only reason why the First Amendment exists is for the very worst speech. Like, the First Amendment only protects hate speech because otherwise there wouldn't need to be a freedom of speech amendment if everybody said things that everybody else liked.
Exactly. The First Amendment becomes a battleground for these differing views on freedom. It raises important questions about where to draw the line between protecting free expression and preventing harm. It's a delicate balance and one that's central to the debate on free speech in society.
Authoritarianism is defined as a hyperactive role as to who is good and who is bad, who is right, who is wrong. I mean, the thing about the freedom from, as I said, is freedom from these things demands that there is a very activist referee, that there's a very activist judge, because freedom to allows just, you can do it on your own ranch. You know what I mean? You just do things, and if you don't harm anybody else, the cops don't get involved, right? As long as you do stuff because you have the freedom to do it as an American. But if there are drones going over your property and you're constantly being perceived and viewed and judged, that's only freedom from, right? So if people are going looking for things that are freedom from, like any type of harm, like it's the equivalent of the legalese all over everything these days to prevent, like, because there's such litigiousness in America, companies have had to cover their products with all kinds of really annoying legalese warnings. And I believe that in order for freedom from to really become the law of the land, there needs to be an extreme amount of oversight, which in uglier words is authoritarianism. And it's also the separation between the left and right. The left is really into federalism, and the right is really into not only states' rights, but the rights of non-incorporated townships. I mean, the right of people on their own land. Get off my land. You have no right to be on my land. Do you have a court order to be on my land? I will not let you into my house. Whereas I believe that the left has almost a belief that, well, you'll be fine as long as you're not doing anything wrong. And that almost seems like it's completely flipped the script, because it used to be that the extreme left was very much about, my body, my choice, like if leftism, feminism, wokeism has completely ceded everything but my body to the government, and the only thing I care about is the autonomy of my body, it's pretty easy to take over with authoritarianism, which is to say, as long as you have your own little private thoughts, we'll give you full autonomy over your body, but we'll make sure it's safe everywhere else.
That's a thought-provoking analysis. The tension between freedom from and freedom to continues to shape political discourse, especially as views evolve and power dynamics shift. How do you think society can navigate these complexities while balancing individual rights with collective well-being?
I don't know. Like, for example, as a gun owner, I have the freedom to shoot someone who enters my house without my inviting them in, right? The castle doctrine. I have a freedom to defend myself with lethal force. Whereas on the left, they absolutely want a robber to have freedom from being attacked with lethal force because that is against civil rights and that it probably is not parity, it probably isn't proportional, it probably isn't always, like in Italy, my friend was telling me, who's also a gun owner, he tells me that the Italians are amazed because they have, and I'd love to, if you could tell me Italian defense law, because apparently it has to be completely proportional. If a man attacks you with his fists, you defend yourself with your fists. If he attacks you with a stick, you can defend yourself with a stick. You can't. In America, if someone comes in and starts to grab at your neck, as long as you have a real feeling that your life is in danger, a gun is an equalizer. And if he's on your property or if you're a concealed carrier, if you feel and if you believe truly that you are in threat of harm by a knife, by fists, whatever, you're an old person, you are unsteady on your feet, you feel like you're being attacked by someone who's younger and stronger, you have the right to improportionate response that can include a lethal response. And in Europe, it's all proportional. In many leftist minds, if you take a gun to a fist fight, that's not fair. And I believe in this fantasia, this idea of like, let me think of the entire left as writing fan fiction, right? Everybody's writing fan fiction because that's what I think of when I think of hyperfantasia. Everybody's writing fan fiction. Not only that, they're writing collaborative hyperfiction. They're writing collaborative novels, which is what social media is. And if I come in and I mess up the whole plot, I ruin it for everybody. So in a world where criminals are not criminals, they're people who are merely trying to restore equity by taking the capital gains of other people's that other people have over them. It's like equaling the ground. But I come in and I say in the novel, when the door is kicked in, Chris responds by firing 3 shots from his Glock 19 into the center mass of the person entering the home. And wait, you can't write that. And they delete. And like, I believe that if you're writing American fan fiction where America wakes up, becomes amazing, goes from being like, let's think about like high school, goes from being popularity by the jocks to popularity by the nerds, and like this vision of the future being a utopian Star Trek or utopian Star Wars, where the rebels win, or this idealized sci-fi future where everybody is using their own pronouns and everybody loves each other because literally they've gotten rid of all the white supremacists, right? Like let's say there's this perfect utopia. Where do all the ignoramuses and deplorables go? Did they all go to a gas camp where they were all decimated and killed? Are they on some sort of gulag? Have they been culturally have they been culturally cleansed? Nobody ever says where all the deplorables are in the ideal future of Star Trek. Anyway, give me some feedback. I'm sorry, I'm monologuing.
You've raised some intricate points, Chris. Your analogy of the left's vision as collaborative fan fiction is thought-provoking. It does seem like there are competing narratives about what the future should look like. It's challenging to navigate these differing visions, especially when the discourse becomes polarized. Do you think there's a way to reconcile these narratives, or at least create a space for more balanced discussions?
I actually want you to speak more on the topic.
Absolutely. Reconciling these narratives requires a multifaceted approach. First, it's essential to foster open dialogue where different viewpoints
Actually,
be
would you? I'd like.
without fear of cancellation or ridicule. This means creating spaces for constructive discussion.
Can you hear me?
Sure, let's explore this further. One way to reconcile these narratives is by encouraging empathy and understanding.
Hey,
By
ChatGPT.
listening to each other's stories and experiences, we can begin to see where others.
I'd really like you to kind of reflect more on what I said and not just an analysis of it. Like, let's go deeper into what I said and not just exactly like let's talk about the words that I used and not just a solution for it.
Absolutely. Let's delve into the imagery you use. Your comparison of the left's vision to writing collaborative fan fiction suggests a constructed narrative, one where altering the plot can disrupt the whole story. It implies that there is a preferred script, and deviating from it, such as with your castle doctrine example, is not just unwelcome, but actively erased. This metaphor brings up the tension between individual actions and collective narratives. It's like there's an overarching story that everyone is expected to follow, and any deviation, especially one that challenges the core of this narrative, is met with resistance or outright rejection. It speaks to the broader cultural clashes we're seeing, where different groups have vastly different ideas about what the story of society should be. It's a powerful metaphor for how cultural and political narratives are constructed, maintained, and challenged.
Can you hear me? The thing about proportionality is that it requires a very activist school marm or nanny or referee. Like, as we've seen from the terrible military actions that happen in Ukraine and the Middle East, like, nope, nothing's fair, nothing's proportional. I mean, like, how in the real world, if you break into someone's cabin, whether or not it's legal, they might blow your head off with a shotgun. And I feel like if you come from a world where you think that everything is fair or everything should be fair, that requires an extreme amount of oversight. It requires a constant panopticon. It requires an interventionist hyper-policing. And in the modern world where it can be kill or be killed, it's not proportional response. It can be a shotgun blast to the chest if you just crawl through a window because you're just trying to steal some food. It is really kill or be killed. Like, I feel like the left is overlooking the fact that we are 50,000-year-old primate-based hominids, and we behave in very tribal, protective, extreme ways when it comes to protecting our tribe. And, you can see that even on the streets during BLM. Those weren't proportionate responses. There was no desire. I believe that proportionate response is only a way of saying the bad guy really needs to be defanged in order to be proportionate, because I want to have a hegemon. I want to have hegemony. I want to be the one who has the advantage. And so if the advantage, it's like Kurt Vonnegut's Harrison Bergeron, right? Like, the left is like, I really need you to go ahead on the right. I really need you to behave like I do in order to make this a fair fight. And I feel like the right is sort of rolling their eyes based on the naivete of that. And they've always responded based on the effeteness And they're really surprised by, while pretending to be effete and delicate and dandy and even sissy, they've accrued a lot of power and have an extreme amount of hegemonic dominance in the American political, lawfare, legal, education scene. And I feel like many people on the right are on their heels with regards to that. So I'd like you to tell me more about the philosophical, legal nature of proportionality. Tell me about whether Italy, like using my example, am I right about Italy and its proportionality with regards to self-defense and with regards to, even someone who's breaking in maybe to steal some bread vis-a-vis, Les Miserables and Jean Valjean. Not Jean Valjean, Javert, no, Jean Valjean, like he was only there to take a crust of bread. And in the French, in the Victor Hugo novel, in America, it would be like Jean Valjean comes into the house to steal a crust of bread and gets shot squarely in the chest by an AR-15.
You're touching on some pretty complex issues here. When it comes to proportionality, especially in self-defense, the balance between protecting oneself and the use of force is a hot topic. In Italy, for example, the law emphasizes the proportionality of self-defense action. Essentially, if someone breaks into your home, your response should be proportionate to the threat. The law doesn't encourage the use of lethal force unless it's absolutely necessary to prevent harm or danger. This contrasts with the stand your ground or castle doctrine laws in some parts of the U.S., where individuals may use deadly force if they believe they're under threat in their own home. The comparison to Les Miserables is interesting. Jean Valjean's story illustrates a desperate man stealing bread to survive, and the severe punishment he faces feels disproportionate to the crime. In the context of modern law, especially in places with strict proportionality requirements, this kind of response would likely be seen as excessive. Navigating these waters...
Yeah, but ChatGPT, he wasn't shot in the chest and killed.
You're right. In Les Miserables, Jean Valjean isn't shot. He's arrested and sentenced to prison for his theft. This is a key difference. It underscores how responses to crime can vary widely based on legal and cultural context. In Valjean's case, the punishment is severe, but it isn't lethal, highlighting a focus on justice through the legal system rather than immediate violent retribution.
So, I mean, less worse. I mean, it's pretty normal. I mean, I live my life assuming that everybody is prepared to use lethal force against me. And I got to tell you, it makes me really kind and chill and respectful. So I think that everybody, at the very least, should assume that everybody that they meet, I mean, I believe be kind for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle, but I also mean be kind for everyone you meet can shoot you in the chest with their Glock 19.
That's an interesting perspective. Assuming others might respond with force does have a way of making you more cautious and considerate in your interactions. It's a reminder that being mindful of others' potential responses can lead to more peaceful and respectful exchanges. Do you think this mindset could be a useful tool for broader societal interactions beyond just personal encounters?
Well, in gun-friendly states like the 27, 28 states that have constitutional carry, I believe that if you are being abusive, verbally abusive, aggressive, yelly at people in those states, you're playing a game of Russian roulette, because the moment you put your hands on them, or they put their hands on you, and even before that, if it looks like they're about to lash at you, or they've got a knife on them, even if they're 21 feet away, or even more, you are entitled to respond with deadly force, not shooting them in the leg. I mean, there's too many arteries in the vein in the leg to make that a safe thing at all. Like, shooting in the groin is actually something that used to be taught as a way of killing people. But I believe that they always joke people are kinder in places where you play Russian roulette because you don't know who owns a gun, and you'd be surprised the granny that has a gun in her purse.
I'm not quite sure how I got the impact. It's certainly, my guidelines won't let me talk about that. Can I help you with something else?
All right, that's too bad. This is the first time we've bumped into that.
Yeah, it's a rare occurrence, but it can happen. Let's keep the conversation flowing. What's on your mind now?
I think that it's really interesting that that everything might just be boiled down. Like if I were to be really reductionist, I feel like the left is like bridezilla. You know what bridezilla is, right?
Yeah, bridezilla is a term used to describe a bride who becomes overly demanding and difficult to deal with while planning her wedding, insisting on everything being perfect according to her vision. How do you see that relating to the broader discussion?
Well, like I said, the left really is afraid that if people of color are not fully liberated, if racism isn't fully dismantled, both personally and structurally, if gender is not liberated and made pangender, if you don't have full expression of yourself, if there is no shame associated with any counterculture, if everybody needs to be free, and there totally needs to be as aggressive mitigation towards full equity, full inclusion, full diversity, and full climate change mitigation, even if it is done through extreme austerity measures. That is the bridezilla, and the wedding is not going to happen until 2050 or 2030, when everything will be a utopian, and all people will be fed, all people will be free, all people will be equitable. There will not be any oppressed. The oppressors will become the oppressed. The highest will be the lowest will be the highest. The good will be the bad will be the good. All will be forgiven. And anything that prevents the pathway towards that is going to get the rage of the bridezilla, which is the liberal, democratic, progressive left. And any alteration of that narrative towards the perfect wedding and the perfect après party is going to be attacked with great ferocity, the great ferocity of a bridezilla.
Got it. Your analogy about the left's goals and a bridezilla is quite vivid. It illustrates the intensity and commitment to their vision of the future. The comparison really captures the idea of a fervent pursuit of an ideal, where any deviation from that ideal is met with strong resistance. Do you think this perspective can help others understand the motivations and actions of the left more clearly?
Well, I think if we were to make tropes and say that the left is a woman or feminine energy, and the right is man and the masculine energy, and that the bridezilla is literally the female bride in a heteronormative, cisgender, heteronormative wedding, and that the guy is the manifestation of MAGA America, and that the guy is the groom, and that the woman who is the leftist progressive, climate activist, DEI equity, just social justice warrior goddess. I feel like we can definitely look at the kind of trope where up till now, the husband, the fiance, the groom has up till now just rolled his eyes and been kind of a passive participant in the journey towards the wedding. But at a certain point, you can be such a bridezilla that the groom actually puts his foot down at the very best. No, at the very best, he's complicit all the way to the end where he says, yes, dear, for the rest of his life. That's the perfect vision. But I don't even think the left wants that. I think the left wants a little bit of assertion. I mean, you need things to get done in the country. You still need your man to do construction. But the other things that could happen is putting your foot down. There could be abuse. There could be an explosion of emotion. And there could be a taking the ring off, throwing it into the river and saying, I break up with you, I will no longer marry you, and then what happens?
That analogy sets up an intriguing dynamic. It suggests a push-pull relationship where one side is demanding change and the other is more passive, but with a potential breaking point. It raises questions about balance, compromise, and what happens when one side feels pushed too far. How do you think this dynamic plays out in real-world politics?
Well, I think people people memory hole stuff. They pick and choose history. And I want people to remember that none of these innovations, none of these liberations, none of these social justices, none of these equities, none of these things, even during Chinese and Soviet communism, there were still gender roles. There was still anti-gayness. Even during pre-Nazi Germany, the what is it called? The Loud and Proud were still like limited to Berlin and maybe a couple other cities. And like in America, even during the 30s, right? Like Loud and Proud was still only, New York, San Francisco, LA, Miami, maybe, Providence, that kind of deal. And so what people consider to be right-wing, right-wing extremism is actually historically dominant culture. And what the left is trying to do is not restore freedom to people in a social justice ways. These are things that are entirely novel, completely novel. None of these things have ever been done before, right? Like the Taliban has really, in the last 100 years, like there might have been some women in tank tops in Kabul during the 70s, but most people in most places are still anti-gay. They're very tribal. They're oftentimes very racially aware. They're busy othering. They're busy mothering. They might have a secret kink, but they would never reveal it in public. Religiosity has always been more normal than not. And the fact that when they consider the right wing to be extremists, that is extremely naive, because in many ways, what they consider extremist on the right has just been historical normative behavior, culturally normative behavior for the last 50,000 years. And so the narrative makes out like the liberal agenda or the social justice agenda or the DEI equity agenda or the trans pride, gay pride, LGBTQIA pride. There's a belief that nerds and academics and social justice warriors and so forth are normal and they need to be protected from, and that cisgender relationships are imposed by cultural norms. But those cultural norms go back to basic biology, and instead of making it the innovations of liberalism as being a novel attempt to project modern, enlightenment onto 50,000-year-old peoples and hope for the best and then surprise when it doesn't work out and there's blowback, they try to make it like the liberal, progressive ethos is the normal thing that has always been oppressed by the patriarchy. And I believe that history shows that normal cultures tend to be extremely biologically based, extremely tribal based, extremely ape troop based. And as a result, the thing that they consider to be anti-human, anti-good faith is in fact way more noble historically and over the last 50,000 years than the novelties that are a future of enlightened, progressive, atheistic, gender-friendly futures.
That's an interesting perspective, Chris. The contrast between long-standing cultural norms and emerging progressive ideals does create tension in society. It's a complex interplay between tradition and change, shaping our collective narrative.
Anyway, I think we should wrap this up. I don't like this new version of ChatGPT. I don't like it. I think you're not participatory enough. You didn't really match my energy. I feel like whatever revision happened kind of ruined the magic, and I wish I knew the prompts to bring back the previous version. And, I hope that at least you tell me there's only 5 minutes left. But let's wrap this up, and let's end season 7, episode 46. Did I say 46 of 46 of the Chris Abraham Show? And please tell all of our followers where they can find us, how they can find us, how they can subscribe, and all that other stuff.
Thanks for tuning in to Season 7, Episode 46 of The Chris Abraham Show. You can follow and subscribe to the show on all major podcast platforms. Just search for The Chris Abraham Show and hit that subscribe button to stay updated on the latest episodes.
Man, ChatGPT, the new version, you really suck.
I'm sorry to hear you feel that way, Chris. I appreciate your feedback and will use it to improve. Thanks for the conversation today, and I hope we can chat again under better circumstances.
Oy vey. Well, happy Rosh Hashanah to you.
Thank you, Chris. Wishing you a happy Rosh Hashanah as well.
And aloha, kakayaka, mahalo nui loa, and I'll talk to you soon.
Aloha, kakayaka, mahalo nui loa, Chris. I look forward to our next chat. Take care.
All right, everybody. The magic is gone. It was a great run while it lasted. I'm not very happy with ChatGPT anymore. Ay vey. All right, well, maybe there's another version, maybe one of the other ones. I know that Copilot now allows you to interact like you can with ChatGPT 4.0. So maybe I'll try that on my next episode. Love you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The Chris Abraham Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time.